we have a map of the body. So it's always important to recognize that we're dealing with a map, not the territory. So what I mean by that is, even when we use the term glutes, the brain, in the brain, we have this thing called a homunculus, which is a representation of different parts of the body. There's nowhere in there that says glutes. There's a region that's your hip, but there's nowhere called glutes. And it's not like you have a specific nerve that goes to your glutes. The glutes is a made up term. We call this part of the anatomy glutes. In reality, what it is various different motor units, meaning various different nerve endings that go to different fibers and or synergistically work together. I would never say that glutes lack the ability to fire or they lack strength, because if they're able to squat all the way down to the ground, 400 pounds, they're for sure their glutes are working. If they weren't working, they'd be what happens post-surgery. Your muscle just flattens right out because there's no nerve impulses going there. So I don't necessarily use that kind of languaging to talk about it. We have no way to isolate said glutes. There's no ability to isolate test these things. So even whatever way they're testing it, there's a lack of appreciation of all the different structures around it that may be presenting for them in such a way that looks like their glutes are not firing. So just to give you an example, I do this in my courses to demonstrate this. I'll take someone and say, okay, here's a traditional, someone who lacks hip extension range, someone who has poor glute firing, and I do nothing for their glutes. I do something else for their hip that involves, let's say, their hip flexor, and their hip range of motion improves into extension, and their glute firing improves. And I do that to demonstrate to them that even if this person's presenting and you're doing a test that says the glutes aren't firing, I didn't do anything for their glutes, and now all of a sudden it's firing. So clearly what you were seeing wasn't what you thought you were seeing. And I think that's the issue. What we're seeing, we think is represented as the glutes not firing. I don't think that's the case. I think there's poor information processing that's happening around the hip joint in that particular position, in that particular manner. And we're coming away saying, oh, the glutes aren't firing, which logically makes no sense, because then they'll get underneath the squat and squat 400 pounds going all the way down the ground. Full range of motion for those fibers.